I wasn't sure about the age mix this afternoon, so I decided to follow the concept of Bella's books, where the story for kids is side by side with cougar facts and recent research findings. In Charles the Crowded Cougar, an orphaned cougar faces danger from noisy bulldozers, mean male cougars, hunters, and scary road crossings. Smart, sage, generous wildlife ambassador Bella befriends Charles, offers advice about humans, and helps the cougar out of a prickly situation. Bella actually is celebrating her 11th birthday today. She's getting lots of naps and a bone marrow later on. She had 8 puppies 8 years ago, and Blue is one of her pups. She's got gray highlights on her muzzle and on her eyelashes, while Blue has an enormous head. Bella's fictional persona, I have to confess, wise, retired journalist with Blue as a sidekick, is really nothing like her real life persona. Some of my family members are on this call and they will yell at me if I don't acknowledge that. In real life, she's a chow hound. She gets into any food that is left around, and she's not perfect. But Blue and Bella get mistaken for bears quite often. So we have them wear an orange vest, as you can see in this picture. You're going to meet Bella and Blue later on today during the Q&A. So more about them later. But let's turn to cougars. Cougars are many, many things, so much more than just scary, feared predators. They are family members, ecological engineers, healers, celebrities, smart observers, and representative of other carnivores and wildlife at risk. So we'll start with a story called Border Cat, which features an observant cougar feeling crowded. The female puma sleeps in a dense thicket of mesquite. Songbirds and owls occupy the branches above, while a rattlesnake lies curled up in a pile of rocks close by. The breaking of branches and heavy shuffling of feet disrupt the puma's dreams. 50 yards from her daybed, figures are seeking shade from the noon sun. They are loud and clumsy with their movements. The puma raises her head and watches. What she witnesses is not new to her. This disturbance is becoming more and more common in her daily existence. 4 people find refuge in the shade of an ash tree. They speak in soft tones. The puma can smell their fear. Puma has followed humans in the past until her curiosity was satisfied. The beings are not prey and couldn't be predators. That was all that mattered. Suddenly, something new happens. The strange beings begin to run. The puma's ears prick up and her body tenses. A loud rumbling comes towards the puma with the speed of an antelope. It's a large, shiny being. It dwarfs any prey that she has ever encountered. 2 more creatures emerge and chase the others up the slope. It is just too much for the puma. She sprints up the hillside and watches the chase. Their technique is weak, even as their pouncing on the prey is awkward. There's some struggle, but then the attack is over. All beings are still alive. Perhaps they are playing a game like she does with her prey on occasion. The puma turns east and follows a game trail to another section of her territory. She will never return to this wash again. So what can we take from this story? The puma is clearly not impressed by human hunting techniques, nor our clumsiness in the woods. She wonders what sort of game the humans are playing. She doesn't know what to make of the truck. Her adaptive approach is to stop visiting this part of her territory. Such avoidance behavior works in remote landscapes, but gets more difficult when cougar territories are encroached upon by houses and highways and humans. Notice how her reddish coat blends into the red rocks. So let's talk a little bit about cougar coats and other aspects of their remarkable lives. Puma cola means cat of one color. The cougar in the lower left has a white mustache, a white chest, a dark mustache, and a dark tipped tail. A cougar is one colored only when compared with the jaguar, which is in the upper left, the lynx in the middle, and the bobcat, the other cats of the Americas. Cougar coat hues vary from place to place based on the colors in their habitats. Reddish desert cats, like the one we saw in the story, are reddish. Southern pumas are grayish. And someone once beautifully described a mountain lion as the color of cooled butterscotch. Mountain lions, which have more unique names than any other animal on the entire planet, are called panthers in the South. Like other mountain lions, the Florida panther is tawny colored. Black coats can occur in leopards and bobcats and jaguars, but have never been seen in mountain lions. Note, well, first I'll mention this. There's an estimated 30,000 cougars currently in the Americas. Their range is about 1/3 of its original size. And new sightings are beginning to be seen in the Midwest, repopulating eastward as males try to find new territories. And note the tiny red dot on this picture of southern Florida where panthers still survive. One intrepid mountain lion traveled over 1,500 miles from South Dakota up to Minnesota, through Canada, down through the Adirondacks, until he was sadly eventually hit by a car on the Merritt Parkway. His journey is described in The Heart of a Mountain Lion, which was one of the authors that was featured in this series a couple of weeks ago. So let's talk a bit more about cougar family life. The male has a large territory overlapping with several females. Juvenile males travel miles to find an unoccupied territory. And they mark their territories with scrapes, which are piles of dirt or twigs sprayed with urine. Cougars are much more social than previously believed. They will share carcasses and alloparent. Orphans have been adopted by other female cougars. And females let youngsters hang around for about a year. Research has shown that a female cougar spends more than 80% of her time, her entire lifetime, either caring for kittens or living with her offspring. And I have to confess, as we contemplate having our human kids here for an extended visit during COVID-19, I have even greater admiration for cougar moms. I want to share with you a brief video of a cougar mom and her kits. Rick Hunkler and his wife maintain a bunch of camera traps in Colorado and generously agreed to share that clip with us. But isn't it beautiful hearing their noises and their little chirps? It's really wonderful. So while the cougar is America's cat, there are cousins around the world, including the Amur tiger in Russia. And they recently radio collared one, a female who had cubs, and changed her behavior quite significantly. Her home range shrank, she moved faster, making a beeline return to the den. When the cubs were young, their mother killed larger prey than normal, And once the cub left the den site at 2 months, she brought them to kills. Researchers concluded that even tigers struggle to balance work and family time to protect their cubs from predation and obtain food for the family. And while we're on American tigers, I just wanted to share this amazing photograph. It won the Wildlife Photograph of the Year just recently. It's a tiger in the Siberian forest scratching herself on a tree. And it took the photographer 11 months to get this camera trap shot. So let's talk a little bit about the kids. Wild youngsters, like humans, generally take more risks as they grow and are more likely to get in trouble. As you may have learned from some of the other speakers in this seminar, heavy hunting changes this age-sex structure of the remaining cougars and often creates problems. When hunters kill a mature male cougar, the juveniles fight for the empty territory, and juveniles are much more likely to attack livestock, pets, and humans. On Vancouver Island, where there's been extensive hunt and heavy hunting, the hunting may have been selecting for more aggressive animals because some animals will fight or run away rather than be treed by the hounds, and the more aggressive animals are the ones that get away. In Yellowstone, teenage wolves from packs disrupted by hunting are much more likely to eat livestock. And in Australia, a similar thing is seen where dingoes killing leaves packs destabilized, established territories break down, and the survivors fight and are much more aggressive. So what do cougars eat? This is a long list. They are very, very willing to eat almost anything that moves. An adult cougar often kills 1 deer per week. There have been raccoons killed by cougars, and one Colorado official said that a raccoon is like a walking ice cream cone to a mountain lion. One female in the Tetons actually specialized in killing porcupines. And she would actually throw the porcupines out of the tree to stun them before pouncing on them. And I think it's so interesting that cougars, like house cats, enjoy catnip. So cougars, because they are subordinate to wolves, grizzly bears, black bears, and jaguars, end up leaving huge hunks of meat for other animals, 3 times as much as what Yellowstone's cougars leave. One study showed cougars leave almost 40% of the carcass to other animals. And a study of cougars in urban areas shows that they stay on the carcass for less time and therefore must make more kills. And you can see the statistics on the number of animals fed by cougar kills. So this is a graphic from Panthera, a big cat conservation organization, and it shows all these interrelationships on how many animals depend on the cougar kills for their food. And notice even the soils are enriched and enhance plant diversity when a carcass is left. So I think this passage captures the value and what happens with cougar kills. On a certain morning, the half-eaten carcass lay at the foot of the black rock, and in moist earth by the rill of the spring, the footpads of a cougar, puma, mountain lion, or whatever the beast is rightly called. There was no knowing how far he had come, but if he had come again the second night, if he found that the coyotes had left him very little of his kill. There's also one of my favorite stories is about a Cherokee Indian woman who was mourning the recent loss of her child. She walks into the woods and finds 2 orphaned cougar kits. She nurses them until they are strong enough to hunt on their own. Ever since, cougars have always left some of their kills for humans and other creatures to eat. And the Navajo peoples do one better. They return the favor. If they ate from a cougar kill, they left some for when the cougar returned. And here's a bobcat chased up a cactus by a cougar. Cougars have been found to change their diet in urban areas. In areas of higher housing density, they kill smaller animals, raccoons, house cats, etc., instead of mule deer. These changes may affect their health, and they are actually more likely to get diseases from house cats, for example. But one additional, less well-known benefit of cougars is their impact on Lyme disease. As this painting shows, California's cougars keep the mule deer populations at a low enough level to prevent the spread of ticks. And I've spent a lot of time in New England where tick-borne illnesses are a very big deal. And so I hope that the Californians appreciate their Lyme-free life, thanks in part to their cougars. And that's a good segue to interactions between cougars and people. Let's start with a children's story from Patagonia. My Graham says everyone needs at least one dream. Mine is to see a puma. Graham says that it's a long dream, for it may never happen. She says pumas are elusive as a handful of wind, that their numbers are dwindling, getting smaller and smaller. Some are hunted down. Some are forced from the land where people move in. So they keep shy of people to themselves, quiet, like secrets. Near here, years ago, a puma showed up by a horse corral, stalking supper. I'll place a salt lick on a hill close to our house where I can watch it. I imagine that big cat slipping through our wheat field on whisper feet, slow, oh slow, like fog, but I never see one. I imagine it as it prowls the dark with owls, but I never see it. I imagine winter snow dusting my puma as it hunts in the darkest hours. Still, no luck. Days go by, months. Other animals come and mark the lick with their tongues. I can see cat tracks in the mud after a rain. Time passes and time. Our salt lick is worn down by so many tongues. And there it is, my long dream, golden in the rising sun, warily checking the salt. It does not lick it, just circles around, heads up, maybe sniffing to know who has been there before. I can't speak, so I just point. Graham beams. The puma is beautiful, partly because pumas may soon disappear, partly because it just is. I love how this story celebrates the puma's beauty because it just is, and honors the long dream of seeing a wild cougar. And Native Americans had numerous other beliefs about cougars as healers and protectors. Some tribes use cougar gall to heal the sick. Apaches believed a cougar's cry foretold death, and they would use a dried cougar paw to dangle over a sick person to drive out evil causing illness. And I love that in the Navajo tradition, the skin used for a girl's hair ties helped determine her personality. A hair tie made from a mountain lion produced a tough, athletic town boy. Cougars can also be trouble. Incas placed disobedient prisoners in dungeons with mountain lions, and Aztecs believed in the onzo, a creature with long legs and a longer tail that hunted by the light of a jewel embedded in the animal's forehead. But cougars are probably best known as effective hunters. In Navajo traditions, the mountain lion is a divine hunter, along with wolves, bobcats, and jaguars. The deer people taught these hunters, who then taught humans how to hunt. The tiptoe way of hunting emphasizes the stealthy stalking of a mountain lion. The tiptoe way of hunting also highlights the unique skills of a cougar. They are short-range cursorial predators. They quietly follow prey, sneak close, accelerate rapidly, leap up to 40 feet horizontally, and then pounce. And cougars can tiptoe in part because of fur beneath their pads, muffling the noise of their feet in the forest. I'll have to point out that our Newfoundland dogs also have fur between their pads, but I'm pretty sure that this is for cold water swimming. As Bella and Blue lumber on our walks, they definitely do not have to know how to tiptoe. Despite the native people's general admiration for cougars, they've been considered pests by the European settlers coming to America. The Dutch fur traders, thinking cougars were like Africa's lions, puzzled over the skins without manes. And the Native Americans told the traders that the maned lions actually existed, but they were only in inaccessible mountains. Bounties on catamounts and cougars started very early in 1694, and many, many, many mountain lions were killed in the United States and Canada. Gradually, state laws have begun to change to manage cougars as game animals rather than varmints. But let's back up. Cougars are part of a longer, more complex narrative about humans and large predators. And I want to give a shout out to Project Coyote and Joanne Lambert, who described this chronology recently on a presentation. In the Pleistocene, there were massive carnivores. You see the picture in the right-hand upper right. Very unusual, very, very, very large carnivores. And early humans habituated and learned to live with them. They found tools for hunting, including using dogs. With domestication, predators were viewed as threats to livestock and were gradually wiped out. Wolves, brown bears, and lynx all disappeared in Great Britain. And so European settlers arrived with Little Red Riding Hood images in their heads, and they started killing off America's predators. So as a result, the actual knowledge of predators is now at least 4 generations old for most Americans. And fear becomes the first response. So it needs to be countered by knowledge, like presentations. So here's the question. When you are visiting wild areas, do you actively fear a potential encounter with a mountain lion after those 4 generations of mostly predator-free living? And while you do that, I'll just mention that I'm much more aware of my surroundings when in Colorado's cougar areas. I pay more attention. I hear the crack of trees rubbing against each other in the wind. I notice when the dogs sniff the air, what they're looking for. So how are you guys all responding? So 32% said yes, and roughly a third said yes, and 2/3 said no. And that's actually surprisingly close to the results of a recent survey in Colorado done in just last July. When asked if they actively feared a potential encounter, most Colorado, only 25% said yes, which is roughly about the same as what we've got here in this survey today. And furthermore, 80% agreed that mountain lions help maintain Colorado's natural ecosystems and are important for the conservation of other wildlife in our state. 75% agreed Coloradans have a responsibility to coexist with mountain lions, and 69% oppose recreational hunting of mountain lions, and also oppose hunting in response to increased sightings of mountain lions near communities. And these are pretty similar to results in nationwide surveys. A recent poll showed 86% of Americans disapprove of big game hunting, and 62% favor a legal ban. So cougars try to avoid conflict and seek quiet areas. You are much more likely to be struck by lightning than to be attacked by a cougar. You are more likely to die from a bee sting than to be attacked by a cougar. And an extensive study of 183 cougar attacks in the United States and Canada over a 70-year period offers these general conclusions. It's young cougars in poor condition who are more likely to threaten people. It's adult cougars who are more likely to cause death, and cougar attacks are more likely if a child is present or if the victim moves rapidly or erratically. Aggressive behavior, yelling, throwing objects, charging, looming large, discharging a weapon reduce the odds of an attack. And during the daylight, a dog reduces the odds of attack. However, a dog outside of a residence at night increases the odds of human injury when people intervene to deter cougars. And you can see in this image to the right, the graph, that indeed cougar human incidents and deaths to humans have gone up in recent times. But again, it's from such a low base that You really don't have to worry about fear, being attacked by a cougar, but you also need to be smart about it. So just a little segue to another feared predator, which is the coyote. And unlike cougars, coyotes have expanded their range despite relentless efforts at controlling their numbers. Killing coyotes disrupts their social structures and actually increases their numbers because the alpha female no longer exerts reproductive control over the other animals, and they reproduce rapidly. Coyotes learn boldness in urban areas from their mothers. And Zachary Schwartz is doing a really interesting study of Denverites on their attitudes towards coyotes. 53% can't distinguish between boldness and aggression, and 29% are fearful of coyotes. Coyotes tend to escort people in their territories, following them, especially when their pups are young. And many people are spooked by this behavior. So let's see. Can we identify what's going on with these cougars? Which cougar is simply being curious? The one on the left or the one on the right? And while you're doing that, I'll share with you that there have been several recent internet videos of human interactions with cougars. The videos show humans misinterpreting what's going on with the cougar, and cougar conservation organizations have been very helpful in kind of setting the accuracy of what's going on, and recognizing that what people perceive as stalking is often simply being curious. So let's see, I bet you guys got this all correct. I'm just waiting for the results. Let's see, the cougar on the left, 23%, the cougar on the right, 77%. So actually it is the cougar on the right who is simply being curious. The cougar on the left has its ears up and is in a crouched position, moving forward and stalking. So that's a much more aggressive, alert action by a cougar, the one on the left versus the one on the right. And to give you a little more detail about that, here's a chart of mountain lion body language. This table shows the various behaviors and what they mean for humans, from low risk at the top to high risk. So in general, the first 4 or 5 behaviors are all about curiosity or indifference or trying to get away. And it's only when snarling, hissing, crouching, ears lying flat occurs that the cougar's really beginning to look at you differently. So you need to know what to do. There's safety in cougar country starts with being prepared before you go. Don't hike alone, avoid cougar country at dawn and dusk. And I've learned from the earlier seminars that it's pretty irresponsible to mountain bike or jog alone in cougar country, because you put both yourself and wildlife at risk. So find a little busier slots to run or to mountain bike or go with other people. Carry hiking poles and use them to appear big and scary. And bring an air horn or a bear spray with you when you go. One researcher told me this story from Patagonia. A male puma was crouched, watching an older couple stumble up a hill, and they had no idea the cat was there. The watching guide laid on the car horn, and that startled the cat and it ran away. So an air horn might be a good thing to use when you are in cougar country. And then I just wanted to share with you, I thought you'd enjoy. On the top is the typical appropriate response when you're in mountain lion habitat, and how to respond and what to do. On the bottom is flippant advice to flabby flatlanders in SUVs. So a couple of more tips on safety in cougar country. Make a lot of noise when you're in the woods. When I actually take the dogs for a walk, I tend to put on my iPhone and listen to a book on tape. I want the wildlife to know that I'm coming, that we're coming. If you see a cougar, make noise, do not run, and do not bend down. Stand tall, fight back, and throw things at the animal. Keep your yard from debris, and deer-proof it. Install outdoor lighting and motion sensors. Use, if you want, it actually works with predator control. Use dog barking and howling wolf recordings. And of course, supervise your children and keep them close. And later on, I'll show you our roof deck, which is up 20 feet above the ground on the second level of the house. And it has a dog door so the dogs can go out at night safely, because we live in cougar country. And I want to just make sure that, a cougar would be unlikely to attack a Newfoundland, but it would be possible. So I'll show you the roof deck later on. So let's look at the situation from the cougar's point of view. What is the leading cause of death for mountain lions across the country today? What do you think? Many state wildlife agencies rely heavily on funding from hunting and fishing licenses, and so have a real incentive to increase hunting. And sadly, one Colorado state official compared cougar management to mowing a lawn. You just need to keep on top of it with heavy hunting allowed. So waiting to see what you guys say. Vehicle collisions, that's a really good guess. And that does happen in some parts of the country. Vehicle collisions are the #1 cause of mortality. In some parts of the country, it's fights with other mountain lions. That's rare. But in the places in the country where hunting is allowed, it is hunting. In 2014, hunters killed more than 3,000 mountain lions, accounting for almost 84% of all human-caused mortality. So it's the biggie. Let's talk a little bit about P22, who's a celebrity mountain lion living in Griffith Park in Los Angeles. He crossed 2 major highways to get to the park, but is isolated from other cougars and can't find a mate, even though he has a Facebook page and a dating profile. He's featured in the local school curriculum and has over 15,000 Facebook followers. You might have noticed in the earlier slide about what cougars eat, an Australian koala bear. And because of P22's immense popularity, everybody simply said, he's doing what a mountain lion does when he jumped over a fence at the local zoo and killed a koala bear. He left most of the carcass, so he apparently didn't like the unfamiliar taste. But it's a good reminder for humans, whether caring for zoo animals or domesticated livestock, that there's a clear responsibility and obligation to safely enclose and protect your animals and not expose them to predators. A newly recognized problem that P22 helped identify is the accumulation of rodenticides, which makes predators more susceptible to mange. At one point, P22 had mange and was treated with several doses of medicine donated by a pharmaceutical company. Unfortunately, most wild cougars do not have such good healthcare coverage and would die instead of the ravages of mange. But I'm pleased to report that the Mountain Lion Foundation and other groups successfully got California to pass a ban on the most toxic rodenticides, so that should help the situation. Highways and lack of connectivity between habitats are causing problems genetically amongst isolated cougar populations. And P22's celebrity spurned the recent approval of a new $79 million wildlife crossing over a major highway. The Mountain Lion Foundation, along with its partners, recently won a court case several days ago to preserve an important corridor connecting cougar habitats in California. So here's what's happening as a result of this isolation. 3 males with kinked tails were recently discovered in California. And in Florida, where they've been dealing with this isolated population for much longer, the panther was listed as endangered in the 1970s, although ironically, it is the state animal. Males had cardiac issues, fertility problems, and were unable to reproduce. So 80 to 90% of the population had kinked tails and worse than the fur, like what's shown in this picture. Their solution was to bring in 8 female mountain lions from Texas in 1995 in an outbreeding program. 5 of those females had kittens within a few years, and the numbers, fortunately, are slowly rebounding, 130 currently. And I think they have plans to add more Texas cougars. So cougars and other creatures benefit from paying attention to highways. On the plus side, the reduced traffic during COVID has meant 58% less mountain lion deaths due to highways in California. But there's many, many other things that can be done, and there are many other animals that are affected by highways. Electronic messages in Arizona warning motorists of elk on the highway significantly reduced accidents in an electronic system. And wildlife crossings, when they're being built, have to pay attention to the noise levels in the tunnels and to the lighting around the areas to encourage animals to find their way to the crossings. And one final thing that I hadn't really thought about until I read this study, but they did a study of turkey vultures, and they drove trucks towards turkey vultures that were attracted to carrion at the side of the highway. The turkey vultures flew away, responded appropriately, as long as the trucks went less than 60 miles an hour. But after 60 miles an hour, the turkey vultures were not able to calculate the distance appropriately in their brain, and the trucks had to stop. No turkey vultures were hurt, but the trucks had to stop and slow down so that they didn't hurt the turkey vultures. So it's really interesting to think that wild animals may not be able to deal with the speed of our highways because their brains can't process the calibration to at higher traffic levels. So we've gone over a bunch of cougar concerns. They're multiple and multi-level. We've talked about many of these challenges. I'm just listing them here to remind you, but we haven't talked about fear. Fear in human-dominated places causes female cougars to leave a greater percentage of their kills, and they must kill more often to get more calories. And this has been called the landscape of fear, in which humans are super predators. Some researchers use camera traps at favorite kill sites, broadcasting sounds of frogs and various political talk show hosts, believe it or not. And the cougars did not react to the frog recordings, but 80% ran away immediately from the sounds of commentators on all sides of the political spectrum. More than half of the cougars did not return to finish their meals. And this is very much like the story that we began with on the border cat, where they reduce the use of their home range, which causes problems. So let's shift a little bit and talk about cougars, cats, and canines. I hope many of you recall the cougar scene in The Incredible Journey. It's a fitting intro to some complicated dynamics between these animals.
Sure hope this works. Get ready, chickens. Here he comes. He's right behind me. Wait for my signal, okay? And get down. Sure hope this works.
I'm sorry. Coordinated.
Sure hope this works. Get ready, chickens. Here he comes. He's right behind me. Okay? And get down. Come on. Get ready, chickens. All right. Not yet. Katie, almost. Hasta la vista, Katie! Yeah, we did it! Wow, couple of geniuses, right, Shadow? Hasta la vista!
You should know that a fake but very realistic cougar was catapulted into the water. The cougar swims safely to the riverside because they are actually pretty good swimmers. I also learned that 10 cactuses were used in the movie to portray Sassy. 4 different dogs portrayed Chance, and in the movie, only the domesticated animals speak English. The wild animals growl and hiss, highlighting a real gap between wild and domesticated animals. So let's look at that a little bit more. Whoops, excuse me. Here are some of the stresses on wildlife caused by people and their pets. Outdoor recreation increases the risk of endangered species. It affects the energy losses from too much flight, running away from things, decreased foraging time, and avoiding portions of the home range. And you can see here the various studies that have been done where wildlife gets spooked when people go off trails, where elk respond more to humans than to other natural predators, where mule deer respond more if a human is accompanied by a dog. And zoonotic diseases spread by wildlife contact and wildlife trade markets are bad for both humans and wildlife. And pets and wildlife can certainly be injured in unexpected encounters. And we've also got human attitude problems. At a US Forest Service meeting in Jackson Hole, biologists noted backcountry skiing and snowboarding were harming a dwindling isolated herd of bighorn sheep. And one skier responded, "Well, the sheep have had these mountains for 10,000 years. Now it's our turn." So we have a little bit to do in terms of educating people about the value of wildlife. Let's talk a bit about cats. There are an estimated 750 million cats in the world. And I love cats like Sassy, but they also have a major impact on wildlife if they are allowed outdoors. And you can see these statistics. 3 billion fewer Canadian and American birds compared to the 1970s. And the reasons for the decline are land use changes, pesticides, and predation by cats. On islands, feral cats are responsible for 14% of global bird, mammal, and reptile extinctions. And they also have impacts on behavior. Bird warning cries about cats put birds at risk from other predators. And fear of cats in urban areas reduces a bird reproductive success. Cat feces cause less feeding by beavers and finches. I bet you didn't know that. And wild cats are often infected with domestic cat diseases. So keeping cats indoors is really the best strategy. In addition, if cats are allowed outdoors, they've experimented with brightly colored Elizabethan collars with modest success to help warn birds. The collars work for the birds, but don't work for rodents who can only see in black and white. And here's a visual of the animals brought to a single wildlife rehab center killed by cats in a single year. Just an amazing diversity of animals that are killed by cats that are let outside. But Bella will say, wait a minute, what about the dogs? So let's see if you can read this body language. Is this fear, aggression, or curiosity? And it's interesting because humans, having lived with dogs for many, many, many years, are very good at reading the body language of our dog companions, better than we are at reading cougars, I'm guessing. So let's see what you guys all came up with. Fear is 78%. You are absolutely right. This dog is signaling fear in so many different ways. His ears are back, he's looking away, the corner of his mouth is back, he's got one raised paw so he can run away, lowered body and tail down. So you guys are absolutely right, you're good at reading dogs. Let's talk a little bit, unfortunately, about the impact of dogs on wild animals. There are an estimated 1 billion dogs on Earth, and barking dogs affect nesting behavior and other species. They also hunt a wide variety of species. Birds take flight a greater distance from 4-footed dogs than a 2-footed person. And wild canids can infect domestic dogs and vice versa. Yellowstone wolves were hit with 3 bouts of canid distemper recently. And in Africa, dog distemper has spread to lions and rabies has spread to wild dogs. But dogs also do an amazing amount of good. Patagonian sheepdogs protect flocks from civets and cougars, and the herders leave the dogs alone because, the cougars alone. And as a result, they leave the wildcats to be wildcats. Working Dogs for Conservation trains dogs from shelters to assess cougar numbers through scat detection. The #1 requirement for a dog from a shelter is being absolutely crazy about retrieving a ball. This passion for balls enables the dogs to be trained to find scents. They are rewarded with 1 ball toss. That's it. That's how they get rewarded. And Zoe's trainer recently sent me these photos, and I love how her prick ears match the terrain of the stark Patagonian mountains. So one last section is cougars as representative of all wild animals. So here we go. Here's a question for you. Wild mammals are what % of the total mammal biomass across the globe? This is a bit of a trick question. And I just would like to add that a recent UN study found that 1 million species are at risk due to climate change and other environmental changes on our planet. And there's been an 82% decline in the number of wild mammals in the last 4 decades. So things are pretty grim. But let me share with you what did you guys come up with? Less than 5% was said by 30%, 5 to 15, 30%, 15 to 25, 17, and more than 25, 23. So pretty wide range of answers actually for this. And you might be surprised to learn that the number is just 4% of mammal biomass is currently wild. 96% of the world's mammals by weight are either humans or their livestock, which is just amazing, isn't it? It really is amazing. So kind of grim, but before you get too depressed, well-respected conservation scientists suggest that we just need to get through the next 30 to 50 years, a bottleneck that is hitting us right now as urbanization helps human population and consumption level off. Some species will disappear and decline, but others will rebound. And there's this curve, and you can see the various animals on the curve, from lions and African elephants going down to buffalo and great whales beginning to make a recovery, and white-tailed deer having made a recovery. So the conservation challenge is to keep the bottleneck open wide enough over the next period of time to get this many species through. And I would say cougars are probably somewhat like the buffalo on this grid. Numbers may be increasing as their range expands, yet any one of the many cougar concerns that we saw earlier on the slide could affect those numbers and change the outlook for cougars. So let me just show you what happened with white-tailed deer numbers. Their numbers are not quite up to the level that existed prior to European settlement of the Americas. I know it seems like there's just an amazing abundance of deer, but what is happening is fewer forests, more developed land, roughly the same number of deer in a whole lot less space. So that's why the deer population seems so excessive right now. But there's been a break in the action. Wildlife is rebounding during the pandemic. Indeed, some scientists are calling it the anthropause, where songbirds sing more softly because there's less noise and in a wider range. And the humpback whales can actually hear each other sing where there's less boat traffic on the oceans. So there's kind of a nice pause going on. But we should talk about climate change because the wildfires here in Colorado and California are stark reminders of what's happening with climate change. And here's a campaign where they put a wax picture of a Florida panther outside one of the zoos and watched it melt over 2 or 3 days. And it was sort of to represent how extreme heat and other effects of the climate crisis, like rising sea, are a threat to their very existence. And then we've certainly seen sad stories from the California wildfires about orphaned cougar kittens being taken to rehab centers. So what can you do? Here's a bunch of suggestions from the wildlife rehabbers. Don't handle wild animals, avoid feeding wild animals, keep your pets indoors and on leashes, Make your yard conflict-free, no brush tiles, no chance to attract animals. Don't use rodenticides, that's a very big one. And learn basic animal tracks so you'll be safe in the woods. And here's some more ways that your family can help. Support funding for open space, wildlife crossings, and cougar organizations. Watch tips for recreating in cougar country on the Cougar Conservancy Facebook page. It's an excellent video. And attend the Wild Child December event, which is going to be awesome, by the Mountain Lion Foundation. Learn more about wildlife via iNaturalist app and citizen science projects. There's a whole lot of ways to get involved in wildlife study and learning and preservation. And reduce your carbon footprint by recycling, healthy eating, spending less time in automobiles and on airplanes. So I wanted to give you a list of options for great information for books about kids. The Cat That Changed America, the story of P22, just came out, and it's actually very cute. The Mountain Lion by Jean Stafford's wonderful. The P22.org, P22wonderland.org is this virtual community, which is fun to sign on to and check it at. And of course, the Bella the Wildlife series is a nice thing for kids. And the third book, which is all about Belize and the coral reefs, just came out. It's called Blue Dives In. And for the adults, here's a list of great classic cougar books. They're all wonderful. And an interesting new addition I wanted to add was The Nature of Fear, which talks about wild animals and human responses to predators. And I highly recommend it because I think it explains some of our deep-seated feelings about predators. Please email me if you'd like copies of the scientific studies I've mentioned, and please support the Mountain Lion Foundation and its great work. Our cougars can sure use your help. And I'll end with this camera trap image of a cougar jumping on a wild turkey. It speaks to the serendipitous aspect of living with wildlife. Should you be lucky enough to experience the long dream and see a cougar in the wild, be smart and be safe, but be grateful for their continued existence. Thanks for joining us this afternoon, and I think we'll open it up to questions. Thank you.
Okay, our first question is from Lynn Jarman. Lynn, go ahead and ask your question.
First of all, it's a great program. Thank you very much. I'm an active member of the Mountain Lion Foundation. I live in Julian, California, and we have a very active mountain lion project here as well. One of our projects is to help with the coexistence between people out in the backcountry and mountain lions, and to reduce the number of predation permits that occur as a result of attacks on sheep or goats or, domestic livestock. Can you talk about whether programs are being used in other parts of the country, and are they successful?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the very end of it, but what are being used to reduce predation by cougars on livestock? Is that the question?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, we have a very effective program here in the mountains outside of San Diego. And we have actually moving exhibits where we can show people how to build those particular enclosures to allow the coexistence between wild cougars and domesticated cattle and sheep and goats.
One of the earlier presenters in this series talked quite a bit about the various strategies, and there are really numerous ways to protect livestock, everything from flags to motion sensors to lights to loud noises to recordings of wolves and dogs communicating. All those things will make a cougar think twice before doing anything stupid. And, in general, even having dogs in the livestock, like Great Pyrenees and other breeds, are particularly effective at protecting livestock so that those predation permits don't have to occur.
Okay, the next question is from Suzanne. Suzanne, please ask your question.
Yes, I would like to ask about a comment you made regarding the effects on the genotype of hunting. And maybe I got this wrong, so I was trying to take notes at the same time. But it would seem to me that the more aggressive lions who stand and fight and then get killed would be, again, the ones that would be more likely not to survive as compared to the faster ones that just avoid conflict and run away and escape the whole mess. But I think you said the opposite. So I was wondering about if that's kind of conjecture on the part of the wildlife biologists, or if that's been documented in terms of selection pressures and the effects on the genotypes.
Great question. I think the thought is that the more the less aggressive cats will be afraid of the dogs and be treed and then killed, you know, as part of the hunting. And that the more aggressive ones will figure out how to get away and then be able to reproduce. And so that over time, a greater amount of aggression is in the population. It's been suggested as one of the implications of heavy hunting, but I'm sure it's up for some debate.
All right, next question is from Cammie Nicholson. Cammie, please ask your question.
Yes, my question is, you were saying that cougars are also called panthers, but that they are never black. Why do they say that black panthers are mountain lions?
It's a really good question. I think it just is, people see a black animal and they think it's a mountain lion, but it would be more likely to be a melanistic colored leopard or bobcat, or a species that actually do have the melanistic color to the coat. No record has been confirmed of a mountain lion that is actually black. But it's a good question. And you know, I think there's something like 250 different names for mountain lions, you know, everything from catamount to cougar to ghost cat. There's a lot of names, and then all the Indian names as well.
Next question is from Anna. Anna, please ask your question.
Hi, Katie. It's Anna from Framingham, Massachusetts. Thank
Hello.
you so much for this great program. I want to make sure that you show us the enclosure where you keep Bella and Blue safe. Love to see that space, as I'm sure that many people think of protecting their pets as well when they take them out at night.
Okay, I will do that. So I'm on the second floor in my office, and you can see the dog door, which I had to turn off because they would be going in and out of it and making a lot of noise. And it leads out to a second floor balcony patio, which is high enough above the ground that a cougar would have to be crazy to try to jump up here. So that's how we ended up making it happen. And there's a place for them to use the facilities when they need to. Thanks for the question, Anna. I should also, Blue is sound asleep, but I can show you him. He's right here. Can you see him? There you go. Blue, you want to wake up and say hi? This is Blue. And Bella is also asleep somewhere, but they are snooze hounds, so they sleep quite a bit.
All right, looks like one more question for now. Remy, you have a question? Go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Katie. You talked about how cougars have avoidance behaviors when they've come into contact with human noises and behaviors. And I was wondering if there's actually any way to reverse that avoidance behaviors so that cougars can re-inhabit areas that they have previously avoided?
And that's a great question. I don't know of any studies that have done that to make them feel comfortable. In fact, I think just the opposite happens. There's a lot of work being done to protect human communities by hazing techniques to scare the cougars away so that they don't get into conflict with people. And those hazing techniques are some of the things we've already talked about. I haven't heard of any studies, maybe somebody else on this call has, to turn it around the other way and say, okay, cougars, come back. It's now safe. It's now fine. But generally, cougars follow where their food's available. So they'll follow mule deer wherever mule deer are. And if there are mule deer, the cougars will most likely try to come back to an area.
Mary Ellen, you are next. Ask your question.
Katie?
Mm-hmm.
Hello. Hey, I saw going by in the presentation, you used the word alloparent, and I am not familiar with that term. What is that?
So alloparenting is when two either related or non-related adults take care of offspring. So it's a little bit like a nanny. A nanny of female cat would maybe take care of the offspring of another female cat. So that's alloparenting. And it's seen in many, many, many animals, actually, just like in humans.
Looks like Cami has another question. Cami, go ahead and ask your question.
My question is, you made a comment that you were up high enough where the cougar wouldn't go after your dogs. Have cougars been known to chase their prey up trees or stuff like that in order to get them?
Well, they certainly would chase a porcupine up a tree, like that one that was a specialist on porcupines. The cougar would go up the tree, knock the porcupine down, stun it, and have it land on the ground, and then go down and kill it. So yes, they definitely would go up trees for certain kinds of prey and eat them. And yes, there have been, unfortunately, mostly smaller dogs and house cats end up being prey to cougars where it does happen. I don't know, a cougar and a Newfoundland weigh about the same amount. So a cougar would have to be pretty bold and sure of himself to go after a Newfoundland, but it certainly has been known to happen.
Okay, Katie, we have an anonymous question. What's the single biggest thing, if it changed, would help cougar conservation efforts?
Wow. Changing hunting policies state by state is going to preserve many, many, many cougars that otherwise are killed each year. But the big picture environmental issues, global climate change, habitat destruction, lack of connectivity, those are the big things. They're the hardest ones to solve, but they are certainly the reason why wildlife are feeling so stressed. And the hunting is certainly a big part for cougars, but all wildlife and, in general, the ecosystem has to be part of a bigger holistic whole. And that's only going to happen with more open spaces and more connectivity and more attention to what's going on with climate change. A big task.
Okay, looks like that's it for, oh wait, one more anonymous question. On a smaller scale, what can individuals like you and I do to help cougars?
We'll certainly learn as much as you can. I'm so glad all of you joined this call today. The more people know about cougars and how amazing they are, the more they're going to feel like they need to go out of their way to be smart in cougar country, to protect themselves, to support cougar conservation organizations like the Mountain Lion Foundation. All of those things, plus living a little less heavily on the earth in terms of your own carbon footprint. There are many, many things, but they all add up.
Okay, one more question. Janice, you have a question? Janice, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, I just did. Hi, thank you. Katie, I missed the first like 5 or so minutes of the presentation, so I don't know if you had talked about how you got into this work regarding the mountain lions. So I was just wondering about that.
Yes. Well, I mean, I did mention that we had seen a cougar when we first came to Colorado, and that was a really special thing that made me get very excited about cougars. But my background is in conservation. I worked for the Nature Conservancy for about a decade, and I have been interested in environmental issues and conservation, and then became passionate about carnivores when I began to see what was going on here in Colorado with bears and with cougars and with, as you may know, there's a ballot initiative that is on the Colorado ballot to reintroduce wolves. So, you know, the carnivores really are kind of the key to the whole system working well, and cougars are part of that.
Does anyone have any more questions?
I want to thank all of you for participating in the surveys. They were wonderful. And one of the things that I had taken out of the presentation that I just add is, in general, pet owners tend to be very, very pro wildlife. You know, every study of pet owner attitudes suggests that they are more likely to be tolerant of wildlife. They're more likely to understand what's going on with wildlife. So thank you to the pet owners in the audience who care about wildlife.